Hi, Mark.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Happy New Year. I'm well, thank you.
Happy New Year to you too. I don't know who else is going to show up today. Again, makes me wonder, what am I doing that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I want to talk about is how we pitch this, particularly given that I think there are some important things crossovers, as I discussed the other day with the AI AAIF folks, the
Yeah.
the agentic folks.
hmm
If we start pitching this internally as, look, this is the place we look at agentic AI underpinnings, we might get more interest.
Well, but see, that would be one aspect of it, certainly, right? I mean, we should understand what identity for agentic is, which there are many different attempts to skin that cat. You've seen the CSA research paper, have you? That basically
Yes, I have.
uses
Yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
effectively decentralized identities and a bunch of other it's a
Okay,
large
so
stack.
I wouldn't look at it from that direction. I would say if you want to do agentic AI, you're going to need identity and you're going to need it protected by confidential computing. Come and talk about it in this group.
We can. It's but hear me out, right? So I think we agree on that. There is the general notion of utilizing confidential computing as an underpinning of an enterprise identity ecosystem, right? So, and by the way, and this is not, as far as I'm concerned, this is not optional because I can tell you that workload identity for regular workloads, so legacy workloads, is a thing. Okay, it's going to happen because we simply cannot continue with the current bare token architecture. It simply like doesn't work on many levels. So so when it does happen for legacy workloads, and then people move to confidential workloads, if there is not a clean path, it is going to be a problem. So again, it's my thesis. I believe in it. I'm happy with people challenging it, so we can discuss it. But then when you look at agentic, so AI generally, agents in particular, they are somewhat different beasts, right? So you still, so when you look at the CSA paper, and again, 6 a.m. here, so I'm probably a little slow in my thought formulation. But when you look at the CSA research paper, they are not just saying, well, reuse OAuth and reuse X509 and reuse this or that. They are literally saying you've got to revamp. And again, give multiple reasons about the delegation and about the lifetime of credentials and a bunch of other things, right? This is not just another type of, just another workload to be handed the same kind of thing, right? There may be differences. Those differences are being shaken out. And as a result, um, it is we need to figure out what agentic identity is, and then confidential computing. Like, so you like, for instance, you state with confidence that yes, you must protect with confidential computing. Well, whether one does or not depends, right, on their risk tolerance, on their risk assessment. So, for instance, in our case, when we look at confidential computing right now, and we're starting to look seriously, we look and say, well, we do not have the capability necessarily to do it everywhere. So, where do we start? We start in high-risk locations. And we start with highly confidential workloads, highly confidential data, or workloads protecting highly confidential data, right? So, in those cases, it makes sense. But that's the thing: you need to have flexibility to switch over. And there was this other observation I made. Hi, Hank. Which again, this is a deployability feature. Is a workload is usually something that sits in the middle of other workloads. It's part of some pipeline, right? And so it gets contacted by some workloads, so as a server, and it contacts other workloads as a client. And at some point in time, you decide to switch the workload over from legacy to confidential. Ideally, you want to do it in such a way that its clients and servers do not notice this. Right.
So I don't care about any of that. I mean, I do, but for this conversation, I don't. And I think this is obviously we're coming from different directions, and that's fine. What I want to to say is, and maybe this isn't the right place for it. That's fine, but we need to define it. What I want to say to the agentic folks is, look, there's a strong case that you are going to need hard isolation in order to be able to protect identity and other stuff as well, right? And we think that the easiest and most achievable way of doing that is with confidential computing. Come and discuss how we would do that. Now, I realize that you're trying to get to a world where things are deployable kind of now and in existing environment. I'm looking to solve a problem for where the AI folks need to know that is there and that there are possible solutions that we could help them with.
Yeah. So here's then the question. Say we sell them on this vision, and then they come to this forum, and that's the question. Do existing solutions for legacy or for non-AI, I guess let's just say non-AI workload, do they translate into this world, or is it an entirely new world? Hank?
We don't know. We asked them. That's part of the question, from my point of view.
Yeah, hi, this is Hank. Happy New Year.
Morning.
Happy New Year. Yeah.
It's still okay to say this, I guess. Just very recently, our very special darling in the remote attestation side that wants to do the formal verification stuff challenged the Whimsy working group about the term attestation.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which nobody dared, but he did because he's just like a brute force does things, which is actually good in this case. So first of all, Joe is not here today because Joe didn't reply to 2 emails. Okay, I can unpack from that whatever I want, but it's also the holiday season, so I'm not unpacking anything. So, but Peter Kesselman replied to Osama in the context of attested TLS, RATs, and Whimsy. And he highlighted that from the perception of Peter, the term attestation as defined by the RATs architecture is broad enough to warrant the current Whimsy layout that definitely does not do isolation. That's an interesting statement.
Help me parse that.
Yeah.
So attestation in Whimsy, as I read it, as I read it, before this entire discussion, I sort of asked myself this question: do they mean the same thing by attestation or not? Really is not something that I think about as confidential computing attestation in terms of there is no verifier necessarily. Attestation is simply, and by the way, it applies to the node. It's simply a way of saying there is a statement that a node can make that would allow the agent to converse with the Whimsy agent to converse with the Whimsy server on behalf of the workloads that it's the agent for. So one example of such attestation that has nothing to do with confidential computing or attestation of the workload would be the AWS metadata service, right? So part of attestation for AWS workloads involves the AWS metadata service that basically says, okay, well, this node is running with this metadata, so this node is running this software.
Yeah. And
as a result, you can trust the agent.
Yes, and that is an assertion, basically. It's just a general statement that is signed by an author, the origin of data, basically.
Or someone that I don't even know if it's signed. It's simply trusted by some mechanism.
So if it's not even signed, that it's not even an assertion. It's just data. Falsifiable in any way. But remote attestation requires isolation. Not talking about confidential computing yet, but about remote attestation, because there needs to be a root of trust. And at the very least, that root of trust is isolated somehow.
Not in Whimsy. No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, exactly. Because in Whimsy, there is no root of trust, and therefore no isolation.
Well, the root of trust is the domain, right? It's really the server.
Let me finish. So Peter was highlighting that they fall into the category of evidence. And I think that is due to a lot of bargaining in the past 6 to 7 years in the RADS working group about the isolation qualities between the testing environment and the target environment, which once upon a time was called the attested. But attesting and attested was too similar of a wording. People were afraid to confuse it. So it's now the attesting environment and the target environment. So the very first attesting environment must be isolated in order to produce evidence. But that is not actual wording that is in the RADS architecture. So if you go by the letter of RFC 9334, you could weasel in, I sign this with a very, very protected key somehow, and then it's evidence, which is not what confidential computing is about. Confidential computing is about isolation in the first place. So there's some isolation around the workload. And then there is a believability to the assertion about that isolation, which also depends, I think, on a type of isolation. So there might be two types of isolations here. One of them is the workload confidentiality, and one of them is the believability of the assertion about the isolation of the workload. So RADS evidence could work by the letter without the isolation if you read RFC 9334 the way it's intended to be read, because there are some loopholes there for some platforms and big vendors back in the days.
But, can I just ask a question, Hank? Yeah. Is this conversation related to the question that I was raising before or not? Because I don't see it how it is. Could you bring it in?
And I was highlighting there might be two types of isolations, and that's very important to highlight.
I would say specifically here that Whimsy and confidential computing have a different notion of what's isolated. So under Whimsy, as I see it today again, the unit of isolation is the node. The node is represented by an agent, and the agent speaks for all the workloads that that it gets credentials for, right? That's Whimsy. And there is no implied isolation between workloads. It's just all workloads talk to the agent. Presumably, agent runs on the node. The agent attests the node, which means, Whimsy is silent on how that's done. So like the metadata service seems fine for that. You just trust effectively the control plane. And And that's really that, right? With confidential computing, unit isolation is the workload. I guess I don't understand. Does rats play equally in both of those models, according, like, as you see it, Hank?
I can only say what I read on the list. That's the only tangible assertion I got from Whimsy. Peter said that they think that their use of term attestation is under the umbrella, it fits under the umbrella of 9334. I think John Kemp said Whimsy by default must be more broad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yigesh.
Yeah, one must not forget that confidential computing isolation means isolation of data in use. Effectively, you protect the algorithm, you protect the data and the execution of algorithm, wherever means it is. I don't think any of that term aligns, any of that definition aligns in any of the Whimsy spec, neither anything in remote attestation spec would say that
So the
explicitly.
reason, right, I agree with you. The reason we wanted Joe in today's conversation, and we'll have to somehow find him. I don't know, but him or somebody else who can represent
Who is
Whimsy.
Joe? Just so I know.
Joe Scambray, he's one of the
Okay.
lead authors of the Whimsy working group.
Okay, nice.
Whatever the terminology, but he's one of the principals in Whimsy.
Yeah.
He's actually in Seattle, so I do not know what's going on. I've never met him, but okay. So the reason we wanted to invite, so it was actually a conversation between Peter and I, who said, okay, you should bring Joe into your conversation. Maybe we'll bring Peter instead. But anyway, what we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to accomplish a surgical change to Whimsy that would explain specifically, like, how can we tweak the Whimsy reference architecture in a way that allows confidential computing attestation of the workload to operate in the Whimsy reference architecture. Because today, Whimsy architecture, specifically when you read it, says there is a node, the node has an agent, the node is attested to the server through the agent, and then the agent farms out credentials to workloads. Okay? And I wish that wasn't the case, and Whimsy basically stuck to just the definition of the Whimsy credentials and the usage of the Whimsy credentials, and actually didn't say anything about credential acquisition. But it does. And because it does, it causes all of this confusion, right? So, if I were king, I would basically say separate Whimsy into a credential acquisition piece and a credential usage piece. I do not know that's possible. But we need Whimsy to talk to us about specifically that. Right. So in the traditional world of legacy workloads, your node and where your agent lives, you go party. I don't care. But
Exactly.
each workload needs to be able to perform its own attestation as a prerequisite to getting credentials for it. And the unit of isolation is not the node, it's the workload.
Yes, exactly. So there is a different model in terms of Whimsy architecture. Where does the workload gets its identity? Why should we kind of explain that in detail? I'm not clear about the Whimsy.
And this has this like avalanche of cascading effects. So for instance, the workload API under Spiffy is parameterless. So it has no way for the workload to specify evidence to the agent. So there is no way to even communicate with the verifier. And this is the part that I believe in 26, this, like, speaking again about our goals as a working group, I'm very much hoping that leave rats as an invariant. So we'll deal with rats separately. But within Whimsy, let's explain how Whimsy works with confidential computing for credential acquisition part specifically. And then again, leave the credential usage exactly the same.
Yeah.
Again, Mike, Hank, you have your hands up both, please.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think this is a useful thing for this work group to be doing. There is a very different piece of work that I want to do, and I'm not sure whether it fits in this work group. And I think that's the question I want to ask, which is, I want to have a dialogue with the agentic AI folks, find out what their actual requirements are, and design a system, preferably using confidential computing, that meets those things. And then maybe think about standardizing it, which might go through the ITF. But I don't want to be, I'm not planning to bounce in the other direction, to go ITF and then see if we can make it work, because I don't think that the AI folks will be interested in that. They are de facto standards. Let's get shit done. We'll create our own standards body if we want type people, right? So I think that there's a piece of design work to be done, which is orthogonal to this work, which I think we've been discussing, which I think is very important. And there'll be not entirely orthogonal, there'll be overlap, right? Yeah. But I think there's work to be done here. And I think the question I want to ask is that too much of a distraction from the whimsy style, the whimsy-based standards work for this group? Should we maybe take that to the TAC group and say, look, how should we best engage? Either answer is fine, but because you've got some really difficult technical work, which is very different to this type of work. And unless we kind of say, well, 1 week we do 1 week, we do one and the other do the other, or we have half an hour on one, half on the other, I'm not sure how we're going to make them easily coexist in the same group. What are people's thoughts? Well, Yogesh has his hand up first.
Okay, Mike, what I feel is you should go to the agentic AI group and collect maximum number of scenarios from them. What are the use cases matters to them? What scenarios? What are the deployment models? And then we can align it with the confidential computing and the kind of discussion we can do on this.
So when you say you, do you mean me? Or do you mean people from the CCC? You mean me? Okay. Yeah. I think that's an entirely plausible discussion to have. Is our member of AAIF?
I need to check, Mike. Honestly, I don't know.
I'll have a check as well. Yeah, no worries. Excellent. Okay, I think that's a fair question.
You're talking about.
It's the AAIF. It was formed about 3 weeks ago as part of the Linux Foundation.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll put a thing in the chat so you can find it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So my prediction is that, if I were to go out on the limb a little bit, is that agentic AI will have significant differences to a lot of the current workload identity approaches. Just like
I agree. I agree.
This is actually not good because it complicates things tremendously. But the second belief I have is that far from all artificial intelligence workloads will be protected with confidential computing. So they will have to figure out what it is that they want to do on the identity space. And hopefully we can participate in these conversations and help guide them.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and push it in the other direction, saying if you want to do it properly, you use confidential computing.
Yeah, let me just finish. So push, try to shepherd them, steer them in such a way that whatever it is that they end up deciding will transition nicely into confidential computing. And that just simply means two things. It means that they need to figure out how to incorporate workload isolation and credential key isolation into their stuff. So, for instance, say they always use, autonomous identifiers, right, or self-signed identifiers. That's awesome, right? Every workload generates its own key. But then the second part is how to incorporate verifier into their credential acquisition mechanism. So it's, by the way, the same thing as our last, RATS draft that basically says there is a source of key and there is a source of credential, and there are all the different flow charts that allow you to play in the various menu of choices that we found 4 of them.
So I hope not. I hope to force. I'm not sure how realistic this is, but I hope to force them never to admit to a world where it's okay to use the existing world, and say if we're going to start it properly, we start it with isolation, and the obvious way of doing that Not the only way, but the obvious way of doing it is confidential computing. So I don't want them to leverage existing approaches and then choose. I want to start off with a literal paradigm shift in the way that Thomas Kuhn defined it, right?
Oh, sure. But then say you approach them with that. If I were on the other side of that discussion, I would tell you, well, but Mike, we are putting GPUs on laptops right now, and these GPUs certainly don't have trusted execution environments. They're laptop class machines, and people will be very much running agents on their laptops, on their GPUs. So, and those agents will probably.
So let's define a world where the bits we really care about, or where we can specify, or we can define different types of agents partly by the isolation and protection they have, and say we only, when this becomes a governance thing, we only give certain rights to agents which are appropriately protected. Okay, and that's fine. So to come back to the question, I think that was it Yogesh suggested that I go out and see if I can speak to these folks and see what I can get with them. I think that's a good start. If anyone here has links with these people, that's great. I think what I'm going to do is kind of step away from this thread in this group. I'll keep you guys updated. And I'll probably keep coming to some of the meetings because I think this is important, interesting work anyway. But I'm going to detach that if everyone is happy with that decision. And I'll note it in the minutes as well. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is okay with me. I don't know about everyone else. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So this is what I hear. So we have this decision on the agentic AI flow. We have a separate one that we will continue pushing on Whimsy to, in this calendar year, hopefully by a series of drafts, understand how we can influence specifically the Whimsy reference architecture to incorporate consensus computing style remote attestation into their credential acquisition. So I can see that as a second direction. The third thing I want to discuss, and this again, glad that Hank is here. So last time we spoke, Hank, you suggested that the RATS draft that was presented in Madrid, was it Madrid? Where was it? Anyway, that it was quite large. It had a lot of content in it, and that's because, again, there were 4 different workflows tying credential acquisition and key generation. And then you said for RATs, it would be better to perhaps break it up into smaller chunks. And this is, again, this other part I want to discuss is what are we doing in 26 to influence RATs in such a way that it's actually meaningful and results in some form of standardization.
Yeah, I think the key component here is and I think the scenario is already highlighted, but the focus on a most promising, viable, maybe most adherent to the background check or passport model credential construction. There has to be a binding somehow between the characteristics of the platform, not relying on the OS and the workload itself. And there might be a weaker but maybe essential requirement that the workload has to initiate that because it's confidential and it can't be steered by auxiliary services that are close by because it's confidential. So every workload must bring some type of standardized capability to initiate a identifier construction. I think that's super abstract what I'm saying right now, and it might map to a ton of things, but I think that's the gist of it. Is there pushback on what I just said in our small group here?
Okay, can we double click on that and see exactly what we can do as far as authoring and submitting another draft? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of. So I was encouraged at the TAC, at the CCC TAC in December, like mid-December. Somebody presented trustee. Were you there?
I remember trustee. I don't
Yeah.
remember if it was from
Yeah.
that meeting.
So trustee is this confidential containers,
Yeah.
effort, or it's under confidential containers. And, I spoke with them. They clearly read our output to the point where in trustee, they even have the claims mapper. And they have a method for, issuing credentials to individual containers running confidentially. Now, the devil's in the details. If you double click on their interaction diagram, there are some problems. It's actually neither of the four workflows that we've defined, and it has some holes in it. But it was a sort of a proposal, so whatever, we can work with that. But that tells me that there is a little bit clearly something worth pursuing there. So we're on the right path. Like I hate to be the only one with an idea generally, just because only Einsteins can do that. Generally, a good idea will occur to multiple people. If that's not happening, something's wrong with you. That's my default. So the fact that somebody fairly independently arrived that even chose to use a similar terminology to ours, that tells me that we are on the right path. But again, is that something that could also be translated into a because again, what I don't want is we did a lot of good work. We're on the right path. I don't want it to die on the vine. But I don't have enough experience with ITF to know how to make it more digestible and how to move it forward. So we need to, like what you said, as you said, is a little bit abstract. So can we make it more concrete so that we can actually act on it?
Yeah, I would write down requirements to the workload.
In
the confidential computing realm, because we have some. If you just start an arbitrary workload in a CC context, you will not achieve TWI, right? It's just not possible. The workload must be on your side. It must include some standardized parts. Is that correct?
Depends.
Okay. What is a scenario where you do not rely on a standardized part? Name one.
I don't know if I heard your question. So the case where let me think about this. So you're basically saying some unmodified workload. You would like it to get a trustworthy workload identity.
Yes. How would that work without a standardized component inside the workload? I cannot imagine how that works.
I can. There is one.
Okay.
So, and by the way, that's the one that I think is going to be most common as well.
Okay.
So it is the case where your workload starts up, performs attestation, contacts an HSM or some kind of.
Does things. Now the workload does attestation and contacts someone. How is that not standardized? Not necessarily standardized.
Well, but please just let me finish. I'm almost there.
Okay.
So today, the way workload identities work today, in the world, unmodified world, is somebody comes up with a credential, puts that credential. Certainly works for containers, right? Puts it on a volume, mounts a volume inside the container. When the container starts up, existing unmodified code will pull up the credential outside of a container, outside of that volume, right? And that's how it gets the credential. And in that case, the problem, of course, is the control plane knows the key and gives the whole thing to the workload. And the case where with almost no modification, what workload does today, what many workloads do today, they start up, they attest themselves, and then they go to an HSM and fetch a key. Today it's an encryption key. And then with that, they go download some encrypted data and then decrypt it and work on it. Here, it's 99% the same. What gets placed on the volume is the credential, so the public portion. and then what the container gets, the workload gets in exchange for attestation is the signing key for that credential. That requires almost no modification. It can work anywhere. And it works most critically for all your horizontally scaling workloads where that share the same credential, same lifetime, same key.
So you do not want to unify the way how the workload talks to some other entity, but only how that other entity creates the try.
I think that's a fair statement. So the idea is, again, the credential is generated once for all the workloads that will be sharing it, right? Each workload still needs to attest itself, of course. And then when it attests, what it gets is a signing key. So the one delta is it gets the signing key, not the encryption key. So it can now do whatever it can do with the credential. And the second difference is it doesn't get the credential and key from the control plane, it gets just the credential from the control plane.
So I think this hand wavy, all the workloads have to attest themselves, I'm quoting, I would not use that wording, has to be very upfront highlighted. So this is out of scope. And the try generating entity receives something. I assume an attestation result because again we are hand wavy here, and then does the try generation. And so the input is some unspecified remote attestation output. Could be evidence, could be attestation results, I don't know. And then the actual specification kicks in and try generation starts. So now,
no, I don't think that's how it happens. But like, by the way, Hank, I agree with you. I agree with you that this is a good idea to write the document that you're discussing, basically saying, irrespective of everything else, like we're starting a workload and it needs this thing. What does it need to do? I think that's actually good. But then you asked me a follow-up question, being what, is there something that existing workloads do today that's most like it? And that's what I was answering. Not exactly like it, but most like it. So,
I see. Okay, got it. Okay.
Right? So, so today what happens is the way confidential computing works, generally, without the identity piece in place, is the workload starts and it attests. All confidential workloads need to attest. So they already know how to do that. What do they get in exchange for attestation? They get an encryption key, right? They get some kind of secret, but the key has to do with decrypting data, not with signing anything. And then because of that, it can access an encrypted data store, download some encrypted data, decrypt it inside the trust execution environment, and then go off to the races, right?
Yeah.
That's already exists. They already know how to do this. And I'm saying make a tiny tweak to this. Don't give the workload both credential and the key. Give it just the credential. Make it fetch the key. And then it has the workload identity.
Okay.
Normally, the relying parties release the key, right? Normally, the key is released based on the security
Yeah,
boundary.
normally the relying party has the encryption key or decryption key,
Yes,
and
exactly.
it's the one that receives attestation results and
Yes,
returns the decryption
exactly.
key. That's the mainline scenario today.
Yes,
And
yes.
and because most data stores don't hold encrypted data, they just answer SQL queries in plain text over protected channels. It doesn't work in that world. So basically, your confidential computing is limited to scenarios where the data that you need to compute on is encrypted sitting somewhere, needing you to get the decryption key. That's not how majority of workloads work that we need to convert.
So I accept the premise that we can't fix everything initially. We have to, in order to get adopted, you need to be lightweight. I get that. So, and your lightweight way is to be hand wavy, but have a few requirements on what the workload has to do. and then about how the try is constructed and what it has to express and how its structure is. And we were talking about what was it called? The try token. No, the Whimsy token.
Yeah, the workload identity token. Yeah,
exactly. Yes. So that can be refurbished and augmented, I think, relatively easily. So our focus is on saying what are the prerequisites to create that token, what would we expect from the workload, what other things are out there, like the key management part, and then how do we construct keys and what is their purpose? Sorry, keys means the token. How do we construct the TWI tokens from the Whimsy tokens, the workload identity tokens, and from the WIT. WIT, exactly, that was the term. And what's our added purpose here? And that is relatively small, yes.
Okay.
Is it sufficient?
I don't know.
Well, so there is a class of workloads for which this is sufficient, and that's containers and serverless type of things, right? So basically, things that exist in the horizontally scaling. This is why I'm like harping on this one. Is because this is so common in enterprise computing to just have lots and lots of identical workloads, serverless like lambdas or containers, right?
Mark,
I'm not suggesting it's not sufficient. I'm just asking for proof that it is. Or it's not proof. Just
it doesn't cover the whole solution space, but it gives you like a big chunk of it. Hank, you were saying?
Yeah, I have a noob questions. I'm sorry to ask the questions. It might pretty, newbie, but what exactly does serverless mean? It is like a living corpse to me. So how is that thing?
So serverless is where, so you know what AWS Lambda does, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that.
Stateless, short-lived microservices.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, stateless, short-lived, but they are on a server, so they're served by something.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lie. It's a lie. I mean, the naming is a terrible naming. The point being, basically, is that they're not being a server because they don't require state from the server. Basically, I believe.
Okay, they're for high scalability, typically small, like Node.js things.
Typically possibly even sub-second, sub 5 second. If you got over 5 seconds, shouldn't really be serverless because you're talking state then probably.
So everything that's small and short-lived typically falls in, and stateless as a characteristic falls in the serverless bucket. Thank you.
It's like a Lambda function. Hank.
Sorry?
If you've done any programming, it's like a Lambda function. It specifically enters, does a tiny job, and exits. That's the Lambda function. That's how they call AWS Lambda.
Microservice, but again, it's serverless. So
no, microservice is generally defined in a slightly different way. You can use serverless for microservices, but they can be stateful as well, microservices. So
I see. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Going back to the original question, which Mark Novak has. Mark, we already have a remote attestation spec in the RATS working group with trustworthy workload identity, right? So is that not enough? Why we need more documents? I don't think, but maybe I'm missing the point.
So this is that was Hank's idea, and because Hank is the expert in things IETF and RATS, I defer to him. But basically, and again, Hank, you may speak for your own idea, but the way I heard it was that it was too big, too much in one draft, and it's hard to move forward as a piece. So could we break it up into smaller, more tractable pieces?
Oh, okay. I didn't knew this context and this conversation. So I'm fine with that. I think, but more documents means more problems, I would say. So rather have a simplistic first document which introduces the concept, let it get adopted in the IETF, and then we can say, okay, we have another set of these things which needs to be sitting on top of this document. What shall we do? That's the way I would approach it.
It's the same problem as a large kernel patch, right? It's much easier to get small kernel patches through, but if they rely on each other, then it's what stage do you decompose? It's a classic problem. Right?
So that's the thing. Like, do we let our Montreal draft expire, or do we build on it? Right. So, for instance, we could carve out just this one piece from the Montreal draft, which is the workload flow with number 4. It's two parts. There's acquisition that is separate from key, like the credential delivery. Right. So you can again go back to that. It's the last one in the series, but it's two parts. And we could basically say this works for serverless, this works for containers, and this is what, from the standpoint of a container, this is what needs to happen. So container starts, container fetches the credential from the volume, and then it goes, performs attestation, gets a signing key, and from there on, it has an identity. Right? That's from the workload perspective. And then from the control panel perspective, it needs to be able to pre-compute what that credential is, and then go deliver it to every container that starts anywhere. And then allow the container to get its own key, right? But that if all it does, it elaborates that one particular way of doing try, an important one, right? It's very, very important. It's going to have lots of applications, but it's not everything.
I got you. I think we should start with that. So I'm okay to cut down whatever we have in the draft to the bare minimal, which covers, like, maybe, as according to your statement, 70% of the use case or 70% of the highlighted use cases. We can start with that. That reduces the size of the document. That covers the most important use case. That's fine. Once
And
we
do
get
that
it
for
adopted,
Shenzhen.
yes, do that for Shenzhen.
So
And
what I
then,
think is particularly good about that, sorry, Yogesh.
no, please go ahead, Mike. Yeah, that's fine. I pretty much covered.
Is that if everyone agrees, this is an important thing, then surely we should cover all of the other bits and pieces later on, right? This is a standalone piece, deals with a particular use case and problem, and we build from there. Because you say, well, if you accept this is important, then you've got to accept these others are important as well. But we're not pushing it too far, too hard, too early.
By the way, that would make it very easy for me to get Whimsy on board for that as well, because Whimsy in that case can very much continue testing the node and doing the agent, because all the agent does, it serves the credential to the workload, but not the key.
That's a bonus, right?
Well, it's a bonus, but it's also something that, like, if I'm going to get on the phone with Peter Castleman, I basically say, look, for Shenzhen, would like to do this thing. Can we work with Whimsy to maybe do another draft that explains just this part? Or I don't know how it works. Can the same draft be cross-posted to two working groups? Like, I don't even know.
I don't see the problem with that. But yeah, in the new working group, we should first present the problem, present the solution we are presenting, and if they connect with it, then we can push another draft onto that working group.
Yeah.
But we can stick with rats for now, Mark.
Okay, let's start. Guess you're the old hand at that. Let's start a new. We can actually do it under Try Whimsy. We can do it in Try Rats. We have two GitHub repos now, but we probably need to start another draft.
Why?
We don't.
We have a rats draft, right? Already.
I would need to cut 3/4 of it out.
That's fine. I think the history will take out. So we can cut on the existing draft, right? Why create a new draft? I'm just asking.
I suppose I just want to preserve the history, because everything else, the other 3 of the 4 workloads, they work fine. Like they can also be implemented.
I can create I can just create the branch on that draft, retain the existing history on that branch, and then working on the same repo on the same draft.
Right.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this then, Yogesh. Going forward, we have 4 different workflows in that draft.
Yeah.
Right. If we're going to start each one as its own effectively branch, as its own standardization effort, and let's right, are we then looking at what are we doing?
No, I didn't mean to kind of create 4 drafts out of 1 draft. What I mean is we start with the basic scenario, like say scenario 1, and and because of that we have the draft, and then we can gradually add scenario 1, 2, 3 once scenario 1 get adopted in rats working group. So they are on board saying yes, this is valid. this scenario is important, let's take it. And then once we are part of the working group, we can add 2, 3, and 4 in the same document or create another document. We can do
Okay.
that.
Look, I very much follow your lead here. You
Yeah.
decide how is best. I'm just asking questions
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
on how to do it best. Hank, do you agree?
Yeah. So there are two lanes here. There's the product, the document production in GitHub, which I'm relatively I have no strong opinions about. And then there's the production in the IETF, which is the data tracker. So we have to consider to replace the existing try draft with the new smaller scope one, or to parallelize, which is more confusing, I think. So I think for people to follow the line of thought from the big document to the small document, it might be a option to consider to then replace the big one with the small one. Then the data tracker will show the progression and the history. So there are two different production lines here, which is Git, which is, again, no strong opinion. We can do it however we want. But whatever will be set in stone is on the data tracker. And we have to really understand if we want to have a second document or we want to make the current document smaller.
In my experience, in standards and elsewhere, people rarely complain about reduction in scope.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't want to, as Hank said, I don't want to create two parallel documents which confuses the audience.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
we
is
had
the
a
point.
problem previously, and that was not good.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
All right. Well, so I guess what I need in the next couple of days, if possible, is just, Yogesh, maybe you can tell me, like, this is the branch or this is the document from which you start. Maybe you tell me, take the existing content and just like start cutting things out for now.
Yeah.
And we'll, resurrect it from history later. And that's going to be our Shenzhen submission. Fine, we can work with that. Or start another branch and then, transfer content into that.
No. They are the former. You can just cut and continue. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So can I ask who's planning to go to Shenzhen? I'm not, but who from this group is planning to be in Shenzhen?
I will never go to China while it's communist.
It's still not entirely clear. I hope to do it, but I do not know yet. It is likely, but it is not set.
It's Maoist Leninist. I don't know what you mean by communist, Mark. But,
no difference in my book.
I'm not traveling, by the way.
Communist means since the term has been extended to socialism and democracy. So
I know. I'm just pushing buttons now. Sorry. So it sounds like Hank's going, right?
Maybe, yeah. So it's likely, but still undetermined how actually that will work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoever ends up going should be presenting. I think it's best that it's somebody on the ground.
Nice.
We should think about that as we move forward. We don't need to decide it today, but we just need to make sure we don't suddenly realize that, no one's going or we don't know, how we're going to do it. So that's all.
Yeah. Okay. So what I hear is that we agreed to proceed with the next version of the same Montreal draft. We'll cut it down to just the horizontally scale out workload. And then we will perhaps, and that part I think I would like is to cross-post it somehow with Whimsy so that we can have them on board with our ideas, if possible. And I can talk to Peter. It's just in terms of like IETF process. I'd like the Whimsy working group to also consider it. Maybe even present it twice in both forums.
Might make sense, yes.
Okay. Well, let me talk to Peter in the next few days and see what he thinks. Okay, I think we have everything we can for today. Again, thank you so much for this discussion. This is great.
Yeah, productive. And thanks also, folks, for your mandate to move forward on the other stuff. I think that's a good and sensible one. I don't think it means that we're not going to distract and pollute this this group. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for your help.
By
Appreciate
the way,
it.
I'm very much interested in agentic identity. Yeah, certainly my employer is, because what
I'm
we're
not
finding
surprised.
on that specifically is people confuse solving the problem to selling a solution.
Yeah,
They
sure.
come up with something and they say, well, our way is the way, and buy our product. And I'm like, we're much more interested in what is the right way of doing it, so that we don't end up de facto standardizing something that we're not happy with.
Yeah, absolutely. Get it.
Before
Thanks.
you end, Mike, could you onboard me a little bit, like half an hour on the agentic AI Linux Foundation stuff? I browsed it, and it's.
I know almost nothing more than that.
Okay.
I'm waiting to get in touch with them. Honestly.
Yeah. Do you have a meeting already?
No, I've had no meetings with them. I'm still trying to get in touch with them. It's kind of a fractured group as it is. It turns out there's a lot of politics going on, which, if you look at the number of the people who are on it, is not a surprise. So I need to work quite carefully to find the right people. But I think there's opportunities. So,
but Hank, I strongly encourage you, if you get into the space, to read the CSA research paper on agentic identity. Simply, if for no other reason than it does an absolutely phenomenal job explaining all the problems with current like workload identity solutions where they don't work specifically for agentic.
Okay. Have you already shared that paper, Mark?
Identity. Do you have?
Could you link that in the
I will
minutes?
email our TWI mailing list, and I will give you the link to that paper so you can download it and read it.
Could you also please put it in the minutes of the
meeting?
Sure. Oh, I can do that. I can just do that.
Cool.
Yeah,
perfect.
But read that paper. You don't have to agree with their solution, but you at least will understand the problem space so much better.
And I'm planning to write a blog post for the internal CCC. For the for the CCC blog, just putting some thoughts together on it, partly to give me a launching position to go to these other folks. Yeah. So as that goes on, I'll let you see it.
All right, sounds good. Thank you all, guys.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thanks. Bye.